is the Hagmann and Hagmann Report for today. It's a Wild Wednesday edition. It's May 14th, 2014. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host along with my son Joe Hagmann. Together we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Folks, you're about to hear 3 hours of unbiased and uncensored news, information, and analysis. We have a very special program lined up for you tonight. Before we get into tonight's program, let me remind everyone that portions of tonight's broadcast are sponsored by NatureBox. Order great tasting, healthy snacks right to your door. Forget the vending machine, forget the old moldy pantry, and get in shape for summer with healthy, delicious treats like the Everything Bagel Sticks. Support this broadcast and get half off. That's right, 50% off your first order. Go to naturebox.com/CFP-radio. That's naturebox.com/CFP-radio. Folks, we broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. We're on the Internet. Our home base is HomelandSecurityUS.com. Folks, we've got a couple of new articles on there, especially one today, which just want to thank everyone again for coming through. We can win on the numbers here. As so many people had reached out and said, you know what, we want to help you guys get those records, those government records. Government's charging $2,000, and we made our goal. We got essentially you asking for very small donations from people for the reason being, the more people, it shows the government the level of public interest when they deny that there is public interest. So we've accomplished that, and you can read about that at HomelandSecurityUS.com. But I want to thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for your belief and your trust in us as we walk through this minefield of current events together. And speaking of minefields, when we think about where we're at today, the players involved, the plans, the agendas, there's one person we do think of, not in the planning phase, but in the exposing aspect of things, and that's Doc Marquis. But before we bring Doc on, I want to bring Joe on. Joe, welcome to tonight, to the broadcast this evening.
Great to be here, and this will be Doc's first appearance since before we had him on, right before we went to the Orlando conference, and we are blessed to have him on. His website is It's a God Thing Productions 777, and let me pull the website up here. I just had it up here. It's a God Thing Productions 777.com. He's working on a brand new DVD, DVD 11, I believe, and very excited to see that when it comes out. Doc, it's great to have you on the show.
How you doing, Joe and Doug?
Very well, very well. The million-dollar question that people have been asking is, did we do you well with regard to coffee? Because before the conference, we had a discussion. We promised to bring you coffee. Did we do you okay? Did we do you well with coffee?
I will put it to you this way: Joe needs to be shot.
Thank you.
Where was my first cup of coffee in the morning?
I couldn't get him, I couldn't get him arrested out of bed to get to the first cup. Well, then maybe we should give him my first cup of coffee. There you go. Yeah, intravenously.
Get him up. I know. He's been up all day, right? He's been up all day, and he still doesn't remember. It's DVD 13 I'm working on, and I'll be shooting a second DVD also next week. Two DVDs, not one, Joe. Not DVD 11. It's DVD 13.
That's right, and we talked about that at the conference. Joe, not 11, but 13. Mystical number 13. What's this one going to be about, the Doc? 13.
This one is being called Dictators of the Illuminati. You see, ever since Barack Obama usurped the White House, people have been asking me and saying, it makes no sense. What's going on? And it's like I've always told everyone, in order to understand the present, you have to go into the past so you can understand the future. And by doing so, when you look at past dictators, and I've listed quite a number of them in this new DVD, you will find out by the way they ran their government that they had been, in fact, following the 7-part plan of the Illuminati towards the creation of a new world order. Now, when we go through each step of that plan and compare it to all those dictators, not only were they following them, but when you bring it up to present date, you find out Barack Obama is just another puppet who's following those same orders. And when you apply it to the future coming Antichrist and his government, as pointed out in the prophecies, we're going to find out that his government lines up with the 7-part plan also.
It's a 7-part plan. Okay. Well, you've laid that out very well, folks. I would urge everybody to get Doc's DVDs, this series. I got to tell you, this man put a lot of work, a lot of effort into a very good quality DVD series. Certainly go to his website. As we had said, it's linked, by the way, directly from our website. But his website is It's a God Thing Productions 777.com. Doc, where do you want to take us tonight? Because before the conference, we were going. Where do you want to take us tonight? Let me just leave it at that.
Well, I'm going to take you to different times, lands, and places tonight. And
right.
If you recall, when you and I were at the Prophecy Summit in Orlando, Florida, I asked you a simple question. And that question was, outside of the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ and his gift of eternal salvation to whoever would accept it, outside of that, what was the single greatest miracle in the Bible?
That's right. And I got to tell you, folks, he asked me that question, and he didn't give me an answer. I was stumped, and I sat. Well, I gave him a couple of my theories, all of which were shot down, and it wasn't until last week, about last week, when he revealed that particular miracle. And I got to tell you something. I had to think really long and hard about this. It's an intellectual question, but so I'll just leave you go, Doc. Go ahead and explain what you want to explain and how you want to explain.
Okay, and this is going to be a bizarre entrance into what we're going to be covering tonight, but it'll be a fun one. You see, for those of you who have your Bibles out, you want to turn to the beginning of Joshua chapter 10. We find out that at this point, Joshua and Caleb are leading the Israelites into the land flowing with milk and honey, and that is identified as the land of ancient Canaan. Now, when they were going through Canaan, one of the first places they stopped off at was Jericho. And if you remember, just by marching around the wall, blowing the trumpet, and carrying the Ark of the Covenant with them, they literally brought down an impregnable fortification. Jericho fell. And word had eventually reached a number of other kings throughout Canaan. One in particular was known as Adonizedek. He was the king of Jerusalem. Well, he had heard how the Israelites had brought down Jericho, had taken down Ai, and how now all the inhabitants of Gibeon, they made peace with Israel. And this greatly caused him trouble for concern. So Adonizedek literally sent to 4 of his other friends. One was the king of Hebron, the other Jarmuth, Lachish, and the king of Eglon. And he told them, listen, if we all band together, and I'm paraphrasing this, and make one giant army, we can take these people out. So, sure enough, they gathered all their forces, and they went out to meet the army of Israel. And they encamped around them, and sure enough, come the day, they attacked. Now, remember, this is a pitched battle. arrows are flying, people are throwing spears, swords are being flailed, people are on horses. And in the midst of all this, Joshua does what seems like, an absolute moment of insanity. He decides to get off his horse in the middle of this pitched battle and have a conversation with God. Not exactly on the surface the greatest military act known to mankind, but what's interesting is that Joshua, in the midst of all this, he turns to one side and said, "Sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon." Now, he commanded. Now, he didn't realize or understand the science behind what he was asking for, but he had enough faith to pull it off. He commanded the sun and the moon to stop moving. And if we drop down to verse 13, it says, "And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed." Now, it stayed long enough for them to be able to take down those 5 armies. And you find out in verse 14, actually a little bit down, towards the end of verse 13, it would take a full day because this is 5 armies. And it says, "So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and hasted not to go down about a whole day." Now, let's reason this out. There's more going on here than people realize. Now, we know that the earth rotates on its axis, and that the rising of the moon, the rising of the sun, and the setting of both is just an optical illusion. They're not really rising or setting. It's based upon the earth's axis, correct?
That's right.
Okay. Well, my question then is, do the sun and the moon actually stop?
Well, no.
Okay, let me ask this question then. If it wasn't the sun and moon that stopped, what stopped? Was it the earth?
Well, one would, isn't that the only thing left? The rotation of the earth would have to stop?
Well, that's what one would think, except the problem is, try slamming the brakes on something that's going 1,000 miles an hour and no one noticing.
Yeah, you got a point there.
I mean, everything would be thrown out into the atmosphere, and the atmosphere would actually be ripped off at that pace. No, you see, the only way the sun and the moon could cease and keep that illusion of, not moving, since the earth is still rotating, all of the known cosmos had to have stopped at once. This way, the sun and the moon, along with the planet Earth, would stop at once, and gravity would safely play upon gravity because nothing would have been thrown out of their fixed orbits.
So you're saying time and space stopped?
Everything stopped. There's no other option. I had actually spoken to a friend of mine at the Christy McAuliffe Planetarium in New Hampshire about this. And when I posited this preposition to them, she looked at me and said, that's the only answer that could have happened. And the Bible says a full day. Now, we also know that there was another event down the road in which this one king, I can't think of his name, but he had done all that God had asked him and everything, and towards the end of his life, after he was finally done working, he thought he was going to get some retirement and find out it was time for him to go. Well, he pleaded to the Lord and asked him for a little time so he could at least enjoy his retirement. And the Lord said, I will give you this sign. Look on the sundial, and you will see the shadow will turn back. And it did. If you go by the calculation of the amount of numbers on the sundial, it was 6 full hours that the sun had reversed in time. one of the biggest questions scientists actually still trying to figure out, they themselves have stated that a day and 6 hours are missing from the Earth's calendar, and they don't know where it went to. Well, if they would just look in the Bible, they will find out the 6 hours went to that one king, and the 1 hour went to Joshua and the armies of Israel. But for a full day, all of creation stopped. That's it. There is no other answer that actually works.
Talk about a miracle of great magnitude. I understand that. And I was, after you had disclosed that to me last week, I was looking and trying to determine some sort of explanation. And the only conclusion I can come up with is the very same you came up with. You're talking about time and space, the time-space continuum just stopping, which... Yeah. I mean, there's not even a point in asking how exactly. It's miraculous, absolutely miraculous. Okay.
Now we have to remember, Joshua didn't have the scientific understanding to what he was asking for, but it didn't matter. He had the faith, and that's all he needed. That's why in the scriptures it tells us. The Lord's own word says, if you can just muster up enough faith to equal the size of a mustard seed, you can look to that mountain over there and command it to go into the sea, and it must.
Wow.
Joshua was working with the faith the size of a grapefruit that day. He had that type of faith. Yeah, he had enough faith to stop all of creation.
Now, what was his
Everything
intent,
that God had put out there in the celestial heavens, Joshua stopped.
Okay. But what was his intent, though?
So-called mathematics of the scientists, they say that there's approximately 200 trillion times 200 trillion suns out there. Now, that's not counting planets.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So everything known to man now, okay, I get that. But again, Doc, I have to ask, what was his intent for asking for that to happen?
Because he needed the time. See, he knew God was with them and that they could take down those 5 armies, but it was going to take a lot more time than just, a regular day. So he had the gumption, stop the sun and the moon so we've got the daylight long enough that we can defeat them all. Remember, this was 5 giant armies now. And giant just might be a major hint here because we're entering into the land of what was known as ancient Canaan. And if we go, now we have to remember, 40 years before Joshua, Caleb, and those people entered into ancient Canaan, 40 years before that, God had already sent them in. And remember, it was 12 spies. Joshua and Caleb were 2, and when they came back, they brought hanging these giant grapes on poles that they were carrying between them, and they were proclaiming, the land is bountiful. It is full of all this and blah, blah, blah. And then the other 10 spies came back and said, we can't go there. The land is full of giants. We look like grasshoppers in their sight.
Right.
But Joshua and Caleb were saying, we can take them. And the other 10 was going, no, we can't. And so God, for their lack of faith, now you have to remember, these were the same people who had not too long before that left Egypt and were sent into the wilderness. They weren't that long in the wilderness at this point. But God said, because these people lacked, basically they lacked the faith to follow God. And I mean, how could they deny, what God was saying? I mean, God had already shown them the 10 plagues of Egypt, God had already given them the 10 commandments. God was leading them through the wilderness by a cloud in the day and a pillar of fire at night. And yet, as the Bible calls them, these stiff-necked people needed a sign for everything. And God finally reached his limit, and he said, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to let them wander through the wilderness till this generation is completely gone. And I will, let their children inherit the land. And that's what happened. Only Joshua and Caleb were of the original people that left Israel. Everyone who went in at this point were the sons and daughters of those who had left Israel. The first generation, if you want to call them that, were completely gone at that point.
Okay.
And it was,
all right.
And it was because they lacked faith. They did not believe in God, even though he was leading them and he was feeding them and everything. They would not believe it. So, 40 years later, this first generation is now entering ancient Canaan. This is the land of the giants. So we have to remember, it's not everyday run-of-the-mill these people are up against. See, if we go by the scriptures very carefully, we find out there's approximately 40 different races of giants that were mentioned. Now, some of them most people will know off the top of their head, like when David stood against Goliath, or Og, king of Bashan. But there's others that's mentioned by name, by race, and by geographical location. And this is what we must consider carefully. You see, ancient Canaan, if we go to the northernmost part of the land of ancient Canaan, I mean all the way as north as you can go, about 50 kilometers away from the most northern border, are two very interesting ancient civilizations. One is known as Göbekli Tepe, and the other is known as Nebali Kore. Now, when we go to Göbekli Tepe, we find, it was discovered about 15 years ago now, according to my memory. There was an ancient civilization there, and for 15 years, these archaeologists have been unearthing this. And it's 15 years later, and even then, this place is so massive, they've only been able to unearth only 5% of the whole. And what they've discovered are these ancient stone circles, just like the kind you would find in England. And when I say stone circles, I'm talking about like Stonehenge or Avesbury-Henge or Woodhenge, those giant stone circles. And not too far away, again, from Göbekli Tepe, is the second place known as Nebali Kore. Again, the same type of stone circle complex and formations you'll find there. Now, the big mystery at this point is there has been no tools whatsoever discovered at either two places. They don't know how these places were built. Now, let me posit a hypothesis, because I did this on DVDs 9 and 10 of my series. That one was called Aliens, Fallen Angels, or Antichrist.
Right.
You will find that wherever you see these ancient stone megalithic circles, check the cultural stories, you will always find giants had been there at one point or another. Now, when we look and consider the weight of some of these stones, they weigh up to anywhere from 20 to 40,000 pounds a piece. That's 10 to 20 tons. And yet, when we sit down and do the mathematics behind these giants, now these giants, at least going by the Bible now, these giants ranged anywhere from 9.5 feet to 40 feet in height. And when we apply a little bit of medicine here and just, fudge the numbers from a regular-sized man up to, 40 feet, let's say, some of these giants had to weigh themselves, some of them around 10 tons themselves.
And they'd have to shop at the big and tall shops. Okay, so I don't mean to be glib about this at all. So 40 different races, giants up to 4 stories in height, and these megalithic structures being found in the northernmost part of Canaan. Okay, wow.
Right. Now let's consider, and I'm not saying this for the pyramids, but there were, according to the Bible, giants in Egypt. And that's in Africa, Now, I'm not saying that they had anything to do with the pyramids, but it is interesting. I'm convinced, of course, like biblical scholars, as they state, that it was the Israelite slaves that built the pyramids. I think that's what happened. Just because modern scientists or archaeologists can't figure out how they did it doesn't mean they didn't. And it really rattles my cage when these people, like on that ridiculous show, Ancient Aliens, think that everyone in the past was just a bunch of morons who couldn't, put their own shoes on. And they blame everything on aliens.
True.
So, yeah. Now, when we look at the Bible, especially in light of the archaeological remnants, and when I say remnants, I'm talking about in that particular, those particular DVDs 9 and 10, I will show you the archaeological evidence, the actual skeletal remains of these giants. And when you look at these photos, you will see that these giants did range anywhere from 9.5 to about 40 feet in height, according to the skeletal remains. The photos, you will see them for yourselves. And what is really fascinating about all this is you have to ask yourself this one question now, and I'll put it to you this way. Now, Canaan, as it says, it's a huge area. I mean, it's massive. And going by, if we apply some mathematics to what the Bible tells us about those areas, the cities, how many there was and such, by my count, there was approximately 1 million giants residing in ancient Canaan. And we know that throughout the world, giants have also been found. The skeletons, the weapons, as a matter of fact, in ancient Persia, or what we know now as Turkey, not too far away from Göbekli Tepe or Nabali Kori, they found these giant axes, double-headed axes, that when you stand them up, there were 3 of them that was found. 2 of them is about 12 feet tall. The other one is about 10 feet tall.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Now, when I apply common sense here, I can't help but think to myself, okay, Mr. Archaeologist, explain this to me. Why would a normal-sized human being try to, make an axe, a double-headed axe, 12 feet tall that he can't even lift?
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Okay.
But they'll try to, and they've got these axe heads also that were made from stone. And you can see where they, had wrapped leather straps around them, but the original handles aren't there anymore. They decayed over time. And when you try to pick up one of those things with one hand, you would have to be someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger if you were lucky, and put it on a regular axe handle, and even then Arnold would be hard-pressed to do it.
Absolutely. Oh, okay. So we're talking the consistent with the Genesis 6 giants is what we're talking about, correct? Except the expansion of races or different types, if you will, races of giants.
Right. And as I said, the big question is, there was 1 million in ancient Canaan. We will find giants throughout the world. I mean actual giants. And as I said, the skeletal remains, their weapons, so on and so forth. But why? Why, of all places, would Lucifer put 1 million, more or less, giants in the land of Canaan? Why that place, of all places on the earth?
Okay. I understand the question. We're going to let you answer that question.
Well, if we look around the dead center of ancient Canaan, there's a small little place there known as Bethlehem of Judea, where the coming Messiah was going to be born. The prophecies made it very clear. And Satan was going to try to stop it. That's why he had 1 million giants sitting there. You see, there's an old belief in the occult that if you can stop just one, and I mean just one prophecy of God from coming true, you can unravel all the other prophecies, because God can't be God, because a prophecy was proven to be untrue or that it could be stopped.
Understood. And folks, it's important. I just want to reinforce this, Doc. And our good friend W says this a lot. It's not necessarily important what we believe. It's important what the occultists or what they believe. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind as you're listening to this, as Doc unravels this fascinating information. So we've got this. Doc, let me interrupt you, because one thing when you were talking here, I thought of this question, and I'll forget it if I don't ask it now. Is there a deliberate attempt to hide the fact that there existed giants on this earth? I mean, it's not discussed.
Yes, absolutely,
okay.
Yes. The National Museum, the Washington one, if they ever hear of anything like in America, anything like that, they send those people out immediately, grab, the bones, and they tuck them away so no one can ever see them. It's the same thing behind the Ark of the Covenant. That's still in the mountains of Ararat. They know it's there, and Russia and Turkey are making sure no one can get to them. You see, the reason is the same. If we can prove giants roamed the earth at one time, then the Bible's right. God exists, and His word is true. And if they're going to go through with their New World agenda, they can't allow that to be known. So they will go out of their way to make sure that anything that could possibly prove God exists and that He's right, they will stop it.
Oh, okay. Interesting. But wouldn't there also be this desire as well to harvest DNA from whatever skeletal structures? We know that DNA exists within bones, teeth, and hard matter more
yes,
so. Okay.
But there's one problem. You see, we're talking about trying to get a viable piece of DNA from bone marrow or from the teeth. Okay? That's the only place that's left that you can get these DNA samples from. And unfortunately, most of them aren't going to yield anything. The structure is, as far as the marrow goes, that's been dehydrated and just fossilized. It's no longer viable material that you can work with. It just isn't.
Okay.
But what they're trying to do, and if I'm right, and this is only if, this is a big if right now. Recently I heard that some scientists over in Europe managed to gather viable genetic material from, I believe it was the remains of a Tyrannosaurus rex. Now, if that is viable genetic material, then they can actually clone it.
My goodness. Jurassic Park for real. Okay.
Yeah. This is what's going on. And this isn't the first time that scientists have been playing God. I mean, they've been doing this since the 30s. I mean, back in the 1930s, Russian scientists were actually working with dogs and literally speaking, medically speaking, they were removing the whole head of a dog, and they had done this. They had successfully transplanted that head onto a living dog. So now you had a dog that had two heads. And other scientists that those same scientists had done, once they had removed the head of a dog, they would connect it to a machine that had pumps and such running in and out of it. Now, was the dog fully aware, was the question? Or was it just the machines that was keeping the head alive? The head was proven to be completely aware. First of all, what they did, they went behind the head where it couldn't see them, and they banged a couple metal objects together, and you can see the ears pricking forward to listen to the sound, as you normally would with a dog. Then they shined a light in the dog's eyes, and the eyes reacted. And then they put some type of substance right around the side of the dog's mouth. And even though this is a disembodied head, you could see the tongue come out and start licking that stuff that was on the side of its mouth.
Really? Okay.
Yes. And now this was done, and this was done in the hopes that eventually, and unfortunately they have done it, we've done it, sadly enough, to where we could start crossbreeding certain animals. Right now, I mean, we are literally, as far as I'm concerned, creating abominations to God. They have crossed, let's say, a tiger with a lion. Now, it can't just be any mix or match. As I recall, it has to be a female tiger that's mixed with a male lion. I think it's that order. It's one of the two. That's the only way it will work, genetically speaking. But because they're from the same family class, that of feline, they can crossbreed it. And they've created what they call is a ligra. This ligra is 12 feet tall when it's standing up. And I don't even remember its exact weight. I think it weighs around close to a ton, if I remember.
This has been successfully done. You're saying this is okay. All right.
It is. I've got the photographic evidence to prove this. I can document every single piece I'm saying without a problem. And so they've created a ligra. They're doing this also with other species now, and they're coming up, as I said, with creations that God never made, and I don't think God ever intended to make. Like there was, they created a lion that was half lion and half zebra. They'd come up with, by crossbreeding, a llama with a camel, and they called it a cama. And then they've also crossbreeded a cow with a buffalo, and they're calling it, if I remember, a beefalo. And they've also successfully crossed a male leopard with a female lion, and that's called a leopard.
All right.
All this came about once they started working with, remember that one sheep called Dolly?
Yeah.
Right. Dolly, if I remember, there was, after they got the first Dolly made, the cloned one, I believe there was a total of 4 Dollys. And what was interesting is that even though they cloned Dolly and it was genetically perfect, I think it was 7 years later, she had to be put down because she had severe arthritis and a lung disease.
Okay.
Yeah, you see, I think what's happening there is that once they start cloning, the cells of the clone is going to be lesser than the original.
Kind of like a generational copy loss, like I think Pastor Langford was talking about copying a cassette tape once and then copying the copy and then copying the copy. So you're going to see
degradation as you go along.
Right. Okay.
And I'm not exactly sure how this is going to play out in the other so-called new species, because that's what they're doing. They're creating whole new species now that never, ever existed in all of human history. Now, some people believe that scientists can run amok here and create chimeras, according to the ancient legends and stories. Now, for those in the listening audience, if you don't know what a chimera is, let's say you have a creature that has, let's say the head of a hawk, the body of a lion, and the wings of an eagle. You see, that's why they call it a chimera. It's a mixed creation of different species. But as far as I understand from the Bible, that can't work. You see, I can't remember exactly where it's in the New Testament. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But God, it's in 1 Corinthians, I want to say it's chapter 15, where God tells us that it says all flesh is not the same. It says there's the flesh of man, the flesh of birds, the flesh of fish, the flesh of animals. There's the body celestial. There's the body terrestrial. Okay? All these things are different. So I don't think, even on a cellular level, I don't believe right now that they will be able to successfully, let's say, cross one species and go to a whole different family, a whole different species outside of their family, and mix it that way. I don't see man being able to create chimeras. Though there is an instance I know of, and this did happen, where they took a human ear and they were able to clone it on the back of a rodent.
Yeah, I heard about that as well, and I understand Doc, I understand the concept, or at least the ostensible reasoning for doing something like that. What I don't understand is what you're talking about earlier, and that's creating these mutant type of creatures. Why in the world would they want to? Would scientists want to do things like that?
You're not going to like the answer. You're not going to like the answer.
I don't even like the question.
Organ harvesting. Think about this. You create your own clone. Let's say when you're in your healthy, fit prime of your life, let's say your mid-20s, that area, and they start cloning you. Well, 25 years later, you're going to be in your 50s, and you've got a clone that's 25 years. All you have to do at that point is start cloning the clone, and you can start harvesting his healthy organs and such, because it's a perfect match, because it's you. And technically speaking, if the science, and this is a big if again, if the science and the medicine holds true, you could literally, so long as you're not irreparably damaged, you could literally live forever.
Okay. What about the clone? For example, the clones being made souls? Would they have souls, or are they walking, living, human, talking?
That is beyond me. That's for the theologians. A lot. Now, you see, this is a big question I've been asked in the past. When we look at the fallen angels, and I'm convinced that fallen angels were demons. Some people want to say the fallen angels are Nephilim from Lord knows where. Okay? Well, let's put it this way. They use the word Nephil or the word Rapha. In both words, from the Hebrew, Nephil and Rapha simply means something that's big, something that's huge. Just like you and I would say, my goodness, that's, humongous, or that's big, or that's gigantic, It's the same meaning with both words, Nephil and Rapha, something that's big, something that's huge. And they've applied that word to the race of fallen angels. And from that, they say, well, they're known as the Nephilims or the Rephaim, in other words, order of angels. That's improper, but that's how it's happened. Nevertheless, they believe, and now this part is certain. The Bible tells us that the fallen angels mated with female human beings, and this is going to throw a kibosh to a lot of people, because people in the past, without checking their Bible, automatically assumed that angels were asexual, that they had no sex. They were neither male nor female. And that's not true because, again, Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4 completely tells us they mated with female human beings and created the race of giants. Now, from that race of giants, now this is where it gets bizarre, and there's absolutely no biblical evidence for this. Some people have been going to the ancient books of Enoch and other extra-biblical works. Now, we have to remember those books are not considered canonized. They're non-canonical works. In other words, they didn't belong to the Bible because they were not considered the works of God. And there's three distinct measurements that was used in the past to determine if this was the Word of God or not. Well, those ancient texts were deemed ungodly. They were not from God, in other words. So they were never allowed to be used in the final finished text, such as, the 1611 KJV. Now, you'll find those forbidden books in, let's say, the Latin Vulgate. The Latin Vulgate 381 AD is the Bible that's used by the Catholic Church to this very day, but that's a perverted text because it came from the Library of Alexandria, and that's another story. But we'll get to that eventually someday. Nevertheless.
And I should add the Vulgate, although it's being used to the present, was Vatican II had kind of nudged that aside, did they not?
Because, if we go by canon law now, when I say canon law, Catholic teaching, the Pope is more inspired than the Word of God.
According to according to the canon of the Roman Catholic Church.
Right. Exactly.
Correct. Okay.
The Pope is more inspired than the Word of God, and going by a number of different popes and their writings, they are Jesus Christ in the flesh.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
And
this,
that's by the way,
biblical perversion going on within, the Vatican.
Right, and this is where we get in trouble. Okay, go ahead.
Well, that's okay. I've been in trouble with all of them to begin with.
No one
wants you to speak the truth.
Exactly, and we have to address this from an intellectual basis. To me, I think it's important for people to understand.
Well, of course. If nothing else. You have to understand it from the intellectual basis so you can accept it on a spiritual level. You've got a solid foundation.
There you go.
You know?
Absolutely.
And that's why God tells us, excuse me, I gave you common sense. I gave you wisdom. Use it. Apply it. Common sense goes with it, by the way. But no. People want to pervert or twist or distort the issues to suit their personal need. Well, guess what? I'm not interested in their personal need. I'm interested in keeping the Word of God pure and the truth pure as it is going out to the people.
Gotcha.
And if they don't like it, they can come to me and they can have at it. Because I'm getting too old, Doug. I'm getting just way too old to put up with all this political nonsense or this political correctiveness or all this new ideology and all this other stuff people want to put out there, especially, oh my goodness, this Chrislam stuff. Keep the leaders of Chrislam away from me. Just keep them away from me.
Wow, we were going to have a class on that tonight.
You will see the thunder and the wrath of God coming from both sides at that point. I will call them down on the carpet like no one's ever done before, and I am not going to apologize for it. Truth is not popular, never has been, never will be. Look at what they did to the source of all truth. They crucified him.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, you're exactly correct. And go on. I don't mean to keep interrupting.
And I have had it. I have had my cup overflowing at this point. As I said, I'm too old. I've been doing this too long, and I am not going to skirt around the issues. I'm not going to be politically correct. I'm not going to give people the fuzzy wasn't version. Guess what? I'm going to let you have it with both barrels loaded. And if you're one of those people who think you're going to come at me from the Chrislam movement, this movement, the fuzzy wasn't Bible make me movement, the prosperity movement, all these other movements, you have picked on the wrong Christian. Because I'll tell you right now, I am no biblical giant here, but I do know enough of the Word of God and enough of the truth of the Word of God that heaven help those people if they want that type of confrontation. I will not back down from the truth.
Well, Doc, isn't this what the Illuminati wants? For example, Christian, the merging of all world religions, the merging of monotheistic religions into one religion. Isn't this the goal?
You're absolutely right. You're spot on, and it has to be. Revelation 18:23b prophesies that the entire world is going to be handed over to the Antichrist through the occult. And it said all nations, not some, it said all nations are going to be deceived by this. So you would expect a one-world religion based on the occult coming in a resurgence greater than all of recorded history. We have to remember that it was not Judaism that was the first religion on the earth. It was witchcraft. The occult beat God in this regard, if you want to call beating God, because that's a religion, the occult. God, I always put it to everyone this way. Religion is man's way to God. God's way to man is through Jesus Christ. And Christ taught us a way of life, not a religion.
Perfectly. Very well said.
And so the first religion would have been witchcraft. It preceded Judaism by at least 1,500 years. I'd have to sit down and do the numbers, but it has to be at least by 1,500 years. It's the first and the oldest of all religions. Now, this is one of the markers people should really pay attention to when they're looking at the prophecies, because the prophecies tell us in Revelation that Babylon's coming back. Isn't that so?
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, yes.
And couple that with Revelation 18:23b. Well, since Babylon is coming back, the occult system of Babylon has to be coming back also. It's the first of all the religion. It's the most of all the ancient religions. And Revelation 18:23b tells us it's going to be the occult that hands the world over to the Antichrist. So witchcraft and all the ancient occult religions have to come back for that prophecy to be properly fulfilled.
You're exactly right, and I've had this conversation with others as well who are very astute on the subject. Now, are you presupposing, Doc, or are you positing that witchcraft, which is ahead of, in advance of Judaism as the first religion, are you saying that pre-Adamically, with a pre-Adamic civilization, this is what happened, or is this concurrent with or subsequent to the garden?
This is post-Noahic flood.
I understand. Okay.
Yes. Shortly after the great flood of Noah, if you remember, it was Cush who was married to Semiramis, and we find out that Semiramis' son, Nimrod, and I'll put this as politely as possible, were sharing the same bed. And so they came up between both of them now. This system, this occult religion known as witchcraft, and it was because of what they were doing before that they also came up with a son named Tammuz. And it was through Tammuz, Semiramis came up with an excuse that you and I both know is called reincarnation today. You see, at that point, Nimrod had already been slain by his uncle Shem for what he had done for creating witchcraft and blaspheming God in such a fashion. So Semiramis pushed the whole religion on the ground. She told her priest while she was on the ground she was having, and this is a direct quote, an immaculate conception. Now, we've heard that one before, I'm sure.
Right.
And she said, now remember, immaculate conception means you are bearing a child without the act of sex. Sorry for using the S word, people, if the word sex bothers you. Nevertheless, she wasn't having an immaculate conception. It's because of what her and Nimrod had been doing before, that she was having this child. And she said, this child, is actually Nimrod, but he came back in a different form. That's where you get reincarnation from. That's been one of the standing tenets of the occult world ever since the days of Semiramis and Nimrod. That's where it began. It didn't begin in India. It didn't begin in Asia. No, it began in Babylon.
Very interesting. And it is the foundation
I'm not talking to you, Joe. I want my cup of coffee.
No, and it is
listen, before I forget, hopefully, now, I forgot to tell you folks this, hopefully one of my learned friends out there, his name is Paul Paxton, okay? He said he had a very interesting and in-depth question he wanted to ask me tonight, if on your show. So hopefully Paul's out there and he's trying to call in. Because if Paul calls in, I'd be very interested to hear what Paul's, brilliant question is going to be. I really want to hear this.
We do too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Paul said, he promised the sun, the moon, and probably, Gibeon and Ajalon at the same time. But it's supposed to be quite a question, so hopefully he'll call in.
Well,
so, Paul, if you're listening, call in, and, then, of course, there's a lot of people, God bless these people, on my mailing list who constantly listen, like Miriam LaPree, that's a shout-out for her. Oh, my goodness, my family, Lynn, Belinda, and Cody Shaleski. There's Joy out there, Wendy. I mean, I can just keep going on. And they're phenomenal people, And as I said before, my goal in this life, my gift is teaching. I teach, and I want to do nothing but feed the flock of God and win the unsaved to to salvation so we can start feeding them the truth also.
Amen, brother.
And God bless you, too, for having the fortitude it takes to keep your type of show going, because your type of radio show, let me tell you right now, it is more critical, more vital than you realize for this day and age. Because let's face it, I don't know how much time left there is, and I don't even know, how little it is. I know it's close, and let's face it, the government, the powers that be, they're going to do everything to try to stop us from keeping the truth going, which is why shows like yours is so vital, is so critical, and God bless you, too, for being willing to stand up for the truth of what God has told us.
Well, thank you, Doc, for that wonderful endorsement. I got to tell you, and it's people like you who have the guts and integrity to go out there and say, look, this is how it is. This is why it is. This is what happened. This is what they're planning. This is what's going to happen. And if you don't follow how easy will it be to be deceived if you don't know what to look for? And I want to thank you for your teachings. We're up against the top of the hour, Doc. We do have to take a break. I'm Doug Hagmann. Along with me in studio, my son Joe Hagmann. Together we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report for this special broadcast.
The Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Wednesday, May 14th, 2014, with our very special guest, Doc Marquis. His website is It's a God Things Productions 777. It's a God Thing Productions 777.com. He is coming out with a new DVD series, and keep your eye on that. He was a speaker at the Prophecy in the News Conference in Orlando, where we had the distinct pleasure to meet him, and we took some pictures with him, which we'll have up on our website sometime soon, and had a lot of fun in the time that we did spend with him.
They're going to put blue dots over Joe and I because Doc just outshines us both. I'll tell you, a dapper individual indeed. I got to tell you, folks, check out Doc's website. Again, it's a God Thing Productions 777.com. He's got False Flag Over Boston DVD just released. Fantastic DVD, folks. You want to get your hands on that. It's about the world knows it happened on April 15th, 2013. Multiple explosions at the Boston Marathon race, killed and injured hundreds. But was this just another jihad by some radical Islamic group, or is there more to what happened at Boston than our own government wants us to know? Folks, it's a great DVD, False Flag Over Boston by Doc Marquis. It's got my endorsement, under $20. It's a fantastic investment, and you will be informed like you've never been informed before. Doc, welcome back, sir.
Thank you. Let me ask one question. When you looked at that one particular photo I asked you to look at, Jeff Bauman in the wheelchair, remember the before photos I told you to look for?
Okay.
Yes.
If you remember, if you look at the before photos, Jeff Bauman never had legs to begin with.
Yeah, we did a show where we went over this the Boston bombing, and you had pointed out several inconsistencies in many of the photos that were there, and I can't remember the date that show was, but it was a fantastic breakdown of all the inconsistencies of the Boston bombing. And you still have those up on your website, Doc?
Oh, yeah. All the DVDs, trailers, and such, they're up on the website. And there's an article I wrote on the Boston Marathon race also on the website.
Okay.
I can't remember what section it's in right now because my mind is on something else.
Actually, I read that article. It's a great article, folks. I could, in fact, we'll link it after the show. Go ahead, Doc. Sorry. Yeah,
because once I put that article up, in 2 weeks, we had more than 3 million hits on it, and I had literally hundreds and hundreds of doctors, nurses, EMTs, paramedics, people who work trauma surgery, and all that, And these people were writing me from, like New Zealand, Australia, China, Japan, England, Germany, France, Spain. They were all writing me letters telling me that my diagnosis was spot on.
You know what,
There's
Doc?
no way
Yeah.
Jeff Bauman, by any medical definition, should be alive. If what it looked like happened to him had happened. Now, we know the Boston Marathon race happened. We know 3 people died, and when I saw the photo of that little 6-year-old boy that died, it broke my heart. It really did. And we don't know how many hundreds of people were hurt. It was almost 1,000, actually. But that incident happened, but it did not happen in the way we thought it happened, and the reasons were completely different than terrorism.
Okay. And folks, the DVD does lay that out, the reasons, and I think that I really believe that Doc is on to something here. And I've seen several in my career in emergency medical services. I've seen several traumatic amputations, and I've never seen anything like the photos that you pointed out. Take a look at the wheelchair, the trauma, the traumatic amputations. Yeah.
And again, the before photos show that Jeff Bauman never had legs. He didn't have legs. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, you look at the evidence yourself, you can see he doesn't have legs.
Yeah, it's a curious thing.
They're expecting us to believe that they were blown off by shrapnel during the Boston race bombing. Yeah. And yet, as I said, I've got hundreds and hundreds of people across the world in the medical field telling me there's no way possible he could have sustained such injuries and looked the way he did in that wheelchair. It is medically impossible. But if that really happened, he should be dead.
Yeah, it's again, the inconsistencies, the visual inconsistencies are numerous, and Doc, you do get into the reasons, alternative reasons for what happened in Boston, why's and who's. Go ahead.
Yeah, when we look at what had happened right after the race, the answer's there all along, and this is what troubles me. I mean, I just read an article today. I don't remember what site it was, but it was talking about how people in America are becoming a bunch of dumbed-down, zombie-like sheeple. And I couldn't help but think to myself, people, I've been warning you about this for 35 years, and you're just finally getting it? We've got to wake up. This is not Never Neverland, folks. This is the preeminent New World Order that's coming about. The usurper to the White House, Barack Obama, is a puppet of the Illuminati. They're the shadow government you keep hearing in whispers in alleyways that the people are talking about. And the Bible prophesies that this New World Order is going to become a reality. This is not fun and games, ladies and gentlemen. This is life and death now, because they're passing laws behind your back that's literally going to make it impossible for a Christian to live in America and do it openly. I mean, look in New York City, those people in Islam, they blocked up I don't know how many roads because they decided one day that they were going to go out there and pray, and I don't know how many streets were blocked, and of course how much traffic was diverted because of it. Yet, at the same time, it's illegal for any one person to stand in front of the White House and pray. You do it, they see you, you're arrested. And don't think, this isn't real, ladies and gentlemen. People have already been arrested for praying in front of the White House. It's a reality.
Oh, yeah.
Wish I would have tried that last time we were in D.C. And, Doc, it's called under the Illuminati, under your website, under the Illuminati card game, the title of the article is Things Just Aren't Adding Up, Part 2. And that is the title for the Boston Marathon race bombings presentation that you put together.
Yeah. You know, folks, it's coming down. And we've got to listen and do something with the truth while we can. Because, Doug, do me a favor, Doug. After the show, make sure to give me a call or stay on line. I want to pass on to you really a major piece of information, and you tell me if I should attempt to do this or not, because on the one hand, it could be considered innocuous. On the other hand, it could cost me my life.
No pressure there, right, Doc?
Well,
but seriously,
actually,
I will call you, yes.
I'm still debating it. I don't know if I should attempt this or not. But if I attempt it and I live to tell the tale, I'm going to be able to grab a piece of evidence that the government would quake in their boots about, and would prove you, Joe, myself, and anyone else along this line that we've been right all along.
Okay. All right. This will be interesting. Yeah, we'll talk after the show on a secure line, because it sounds to me, and I have a gut instinct as to what you might be talking about, and this is totally out of the blue, absolutely totally out of the blue. But
well, Lord willing, you're right, and you'll have the answer as to whether or not I should do this or not.
Yeah, if it is what I think it is, then wow. Okay. Well, you know, we've had guests on, Doc, over the last couple of weeks, and especially our intelligence insider, W, talking about the blood and about DNA and about, I mean, just the real nuts and bolts of, when I say nuts and bolts, it's maybe even more than metaphorically speaking, of the mechanics of the New World Order, the fact that the DNA, it's the lineage of, we'll say, Cain lineage. It's a numbers game where the seed of Adam is being corrupted, and that's when we talk about the days of Noah, for example. This is what, in part, this is what is meant by as in the days of Noah, where you've got the corrupted DNA of Adam's lineage. Am I right there?
Oh, well, okay. I take a different slant on that. You see,
all right.
New Testament tells us, as it was in the days of Noah and as it was in the days of Lot. Okay? You know, now, what was going on in Noah's time and what was going on in Lot's time, or, excuse me, as it was in the days of Sodom, I think it was. It's either Sodom or Lot. Someone look that up and correct me, please. But what was going on in both those time periods that was reflective of what that biblical verse was talking about? Because, you see, if we keep it in context now, what the verses were...
Welcome to hour number 3 of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Wednesday, May 14th, 2014, with our very special guest, Doc Marquis. We were talking about the tangible and intangible, space, time, and things that people rarely think about, and how we put a limitation on an infinite Lord. And with that, Doc, back here for our third and final hour. It's been a fascinating 2 hours so far. I've been sitting here quietly, just listening to you and what you are talking about and the points you are making, and it is fascinating. So please continue.
Well, the last section, let's face it, we talked about the history of UFOs, how they were being created in Nazi Germany. And again, ladies and gentlemen, I've got all the evidence on those 2 DVDs to prove it. You can't deny the documentation itself, let alone the actual photographs that would be taken back then by the Nazis of their creations. And we were also talking about time and space. And what has all this got to do with cloning, crossbreeding, giants, the prophecies of the Bible? Believe it or not, there's all an answer here. But I still got to go a couple different directions now so we can make sense of everything.
Okay,
so now
Doc,
we have.
wait, Doc. Let me just ask you one thing, because a couple of people picked up on this, and I'm going to give you a chance to clarify this, only because I don't want people to get the wrong impression here about the birth of Jesus, our Savior, Lord and Savior. John writes, Jesus constantly referred to himself as Son of Man. What do you think of that? Of course, I think there was a phrase supposed birth. I think I might have used that. I'm not sure. But what are you saying with respect to Jesus, our Christ, Lord and Savior?
Christ did was born of Mary. There's no doubt of it. I mean, it was a physical birth. He was God physically incarnated into human flesh.
Okay.
But him being God, he always was. He never had a beginning, never had an end. Now, again, we're trying to understand how God, in a physical form, could be born through Mary. I can't even begin to explain that, because
Gotcha.
I have a limited understanding of everything, because I'm a finite being. We're trying to understand a concept of an infinite being who we know as God, who we identify as Jesus Christ in the flesh. There are some things we just will never be able to fully comprehend. We just can't. We have limitations. How can we understand God who has no limitations? I mean, how does God, in a physical form, allow himself to be born through a physical woman? I don't know.
Exactly. And, other things, too, we were talking about with time. I can barely keep time, let alone understand the concept of time to the extent that, we're talking about it. So folks, I mean, we're talking about certain things that you're right, Doc. I mean, it's a lot of this is beyond our human comprehension, especially when you're talking about Jesus in the flesh and always being. I get that. Okay.
And this is why I always caution everyone: don't try to raise a fist and shake it at Satan. Don't think you're going to do that and nothing's going to happen. You're begging for trouble. You're talking about the number one creation of all of God's being, who was in his presence for who knows how many countless millenniums. And we're talking about a creature who was filled up perfectly with wisdom. So he's going to know things, especially the Bible, better than you and I ever will. Which is why I think people who are fooling around with these fallen angels, they want to call them Nephilim. Excuse me, I think you're fooling around with a being that is deceiving you, because that's what these creatures do, and Satan is the father of deception. This is why, I'm sorry, folks, if you're fooling around with, let's say, these Nephilim beings or their so-called wisdom and knowledge, you better be careful, because you're walking in a landmine field. You literally are. Because these are fallen beings, demons, who hate you and me with a passion beyond anything you can understand. And the only thing they want of us is to be completely destroyed and end up in the lake of fire with them.
Right. It's kind of the soul catchers, or the soul. I got you on that. And
you're fooling around with things you don't need of. And I'll tell you right now, a lot of people don't know that those books of Enoch, people think that there's only 3. Okay, let them just keep thinking that, and they'll be safe that way. They're taking books that are considered very powerful occult books in the occult world, and they're trying to give it a Christian spin and trying to unlock so-called hidden knowledge. I'm warning people, don't fool around with things you don't completely understand.
Okay, but wouldn't, for example, the Book of Enoch, the first, second, third book, whatever, of Enoch, wouldn't, to use those as the basis for historical context, we'll say, is that problematic, or is that still something we should stay away from?
In order to get through, let's just say, just the historical aspects of it, you're going to have to read those 3 books cover to cover, correct?
Yep.
Which means you're going to have to go through all that occult knowledge at the same time.
Now, when you say occult knowledge, this is knowledge that's sacred to the Illuminati, for example. Is that a correct statement?
Yes.
Okay.
Kind
of like.
But and for now, let's just leave it at that.
Okay.
Again, I really shouldn't be talking about this like that.
Okay. Sorry to put you in that position. I didn't mean to do that.
No, this is just one of those. Yeah, I know. People say no one should ever be denied knowing everything. Well, I think that there are some things people should never know. And some of those things, I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to lie about it, I am taking to my grave with me.
Wow. That's a powerful statement.
I'm serious. And if you think that's something, you just wait till we have that private conversation after we're done. And you'll understand why I want to take a lot of that information to the grave. I don't think anyone should ever know that type of information because of what it can do.
At 1 minute after the program, I'm changing my name and phone number.
Aren't we in enough trouble with what we've been doing? Especially, all these people who are fooling around with the occult, demons, and other things. We're in enough trouble as it is with that. We don't need to compound it with other things.
Well, yeah, that's true. I understand.
Better for it to be unsaid and then let it be dead.
Okay. Powerful. All right, Doc. We'll go ahead and continue. Go ahead, sir.
So now we've got, science on the brink of, as I said, achieving things no one could ever imagine back in World War II. As I said, they're creating flying saucers now. That's it's been recorded up to 10,000 miles an hour. And the fastest thing we had back then, I think, was 687 miles, and that was just shy of breaking the sound barrier. I believe, depending on, if you want to really get technical about it, I think one of the set figures is 700 miles an hour, and then you break the sound barrier. But as I say, it should be a fixed number, but people say there's variables because of the weather condition, is there humidity in the air, that'll affect this. You know what I'm saying? They'll drag it to death. Well, anyways, so now we've got the flying saucers. Well, 1950s come about, and it becomes the golden decade in Hollywood for flying saucer movies. Some of the greatest classics of all time was in the 1950s. Michael Rennie, That Day the Earth Stood Still. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah, I do.
That was good. That was a good movie. Back then, you had to have really good actors because we didn't have all these special effects. So you had to have good filming, a quality script, and good acting. Nowadays, it can be anything. And then Earth versus the flying saucers. Oh, my goodness, people. You want to see a really good, UFO in action, without special effects, you've got to see that one. That was one of my all-time biggies if you want to get into flying saucers. Name it. We had more flying saucers. And, isn't it interesting? It was right as that era was happening, we had the Roswell incident, didn't we?
Yes, we did. And yes, in Kecksburg in the 60s, but Roswell kicking it off.
All during the same period of time.
Yes.
No accident. You see, the incident at Roswell was really one of our own UFOs that came crashing down. See, we took the knowledge of the German scientists we brought here through Operation Paperclip. Remember that? Operation Paperclip?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And we were creating our own UFOs. We were. Again, I've got the photos. I can document this. It's in DVDs 9 and 10. I'm not making this up. And so And so it crashes. They lie. They cover it up. And, for 67 years now, people have been trying to figure out what's going on. It really was our government. It was not aliens from outer space that landed. Guess what, folks? We can't even prove life exists in outer space, and yet the UN right now actually has an appointed ambassador to UFO people, aliens. So when aliens come down here and visit us, we've got a UN representatives right there.
And we're allowed to baptize, or the Roman Catholic Church, or the Catholic Church, I should say, is allowed to baptize aliens, or so I understand.
Well, their reasoning was, if they come to us, who are we to deny them baptism? That's what Pope Francis I said. And I'm going, these people know how to play the game, and I'm going to give you the end game now. Now that I've put all those pieces out there, believe it or not, this makes sense. But now we have to go to one last stop first. Why all the cloning suddenly? Why all the crossbreeding and everything? Well, you see, in 2000, our scientists in America said, we are going to do a gigantic work here with other countries of the world, and we're going to finally map the genetic code, the double helix code, DNA. We're going to break it down. We're going to figure it out. And supposedly about 10, 12 years later, eureka, they did it. Well, guess what? The Illuminati scientists had already done it almost 20 years before them. In 1985, up to that point, if you notice, we had all different type of aliens. We had tall ones, short ones, green ones, red ones, blue ones, black ones, some with hair, some without hair, some with big ears, some small ears, some with noses, some with big noses, small noses. We had more aliens than what you could think of, correct? Remember them?
The variations, yep.
Yeah. Now, all of a sudden, 1985 rolls around. Little gray aliens. And after that, we've never heard of any other kind. Why? Did all those other dozens of alien species decided to back and say, oh, well, we'll leave the Earth to the little gray aliens and we're out of here? What's going on that ever since that time, we've only had the little gray ones? You see, ever since the mid-50s, the Illuminati had been working on breaking the double helix code. You see, the problem was they had the flying saucers, but they didn't have the drivers. I remember from my own personal experiments, this was under the 5th Army General Hospital in Stuttgart, Germany, back in '76. I saw one of the early laboratories of the Illuminati in which they were resequencing the double helix code. What I saw there, unfortunately, it's burnt in my memory. I will never forget this. It looked like mounds of flesh with just arms and legs. They were experimenting, as I said. They were resequencing the double helix code. And unfortunately, and I'm just going to say this, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not being heartless, but I have to be truthful. They needed lab rats. And the only lab rats they could get without anyone being suspicious were MIAs and POWs. No one would miss them because they are easily non-accountable at that point. So they took the MIAs and POWs and they were resequencing the double helix code in their human bodies. And as I said, it was absolutely horrific what I had witnessed. But eventually, by mid-1980, they had the sequence broken and they could do it in the way they wanted to. That's why you will only hear of little gray aliens, because that's the sequence they were able to bring it to where they could actually create so-called life, or if you want, little gray aliens. They now have the pilots.
That's what they wanted them for, to pilot these smaller craft?
All this, not smaller crafts. Some of them are sizable. But no.
Okay.
There's a bigger reason. There's a big reason. You have to understand, this is all part of a 75-year-old plan the Illuminati has been working on. There's only one known thing that I'm aware of that terrifies them, and only one. And they've been working on this for 75 years. And this is the answer. I didn't throw all those things out there for a reason. We went from the Nephilims to the giants. We went from the giants to stopping the prophecies in ancient Canaan, where Christ would be born. Remember, this has been a spiritual battle. This is not a physical one, folks. It's taking place in our physical universe, but this is a spiritual battle now. We take it from that, bring it up to Nazi Germany, where they, through the occult, using occult methodology, found out what the Aldebaran wanted, or the demons wanted. And they created these ships. And after these ships, they started fooling around, among other things, with DNA. Once they started fooling around with nuclear physics and nuclear mechanics. And they created these super flying vehicles so that eventually they could put in pilots so that they could, at the conclusion of this 75-year-old plan, be prepared to cover up an event. And the only possible event, as I says, I'm aware, that scares them to the core of their being. And that event that they can cover up right now, if it were to happen in the next split second, they can cover up the rapture.
All right.
Think about this. Think about this. The rapture happens. Let's say 100 million people vanish off the face of the earth. All of a sudden, all the nurseries and all the hospitals, all the babies suddenly vanish. All of a sudden, who knows how many people in the nursing homes suddenly vanish, let alone all the drivers behind the cars, planes, trains, buses, all vanish. And all those driverless vehicles are going to create pandemonium, among other things. How do you cover up such an event? Well, let's say a day, maybe a week afterwards, NASA scientists send out a global announcement that they have just spotted these giant motherships heading towards Earth. Give it another week, 2 weeks, and they make it here, supposedly. And in order to prove that they are surrounding the Earth, well, they're going to have these wonderful CGIs on TV, and they're also going to send those Nazi-made, styled UFOs and have them landing at certain places around the Earth to convince people that they're there. And these little gray aliens, or DNA-modified human beings that are being cloned, they're no longer required to be to have another host. No, they can make them now through cloning. In other words, test tube alien babies. And they step out of those flying vehicles and they tell you, those people, we took them up to our motherships because they needed re-education. You people are truly the enlightened ones who will help to guide us and steer mankind into the golden age of humanity. And it's going to work because it plays upon the human ego, upon the pride of an individual. I'm special. They say, I'm going to help them steer our species into the golden age of humanity. You see, that's what all this has been about. It's been about trying to cover up and deceive people, as you find out, through occult means in the Bible. Remember, as I said, they first started this part of their plans in Nazi Germany. Again, not for the sake of brevity, but for the sake of facts. I put in all the Nazi schematics, the diagrams, the actual plans, all the old photos. I've been saving this stuff in my files for decades. And those 2 DVDs, there are more than 750 diagram charts, original schematics, photos, you name it, it's in there. It takes 14 major sections to go through. It took me over 1,000 hours, 3 months worth of work to prove to you that what's going on with these UFOs are nothing but illusions created by these so-called Nephilims who don't exist. They're just fallen angels. Now think about this. Remember how I said giants originally made those stone circles, like in England, Göbekli Tepe, Nabali Kore, and so on and so forth?
Right. Yep.
Okay. Why are we seeing these balls of light hovering around those stone creations, and why is it in England, in the Wiltshire County, where there was at one time approximately 1,000 such stone circles, why is it in just that area of all areas on the earth, 95% of crop circles are being seen? What you're not being shown, and I got these, and I show them in these DVDs, the crop circles, or crop formations as they're properly called now, that you will find next to Stonehenge, Aves-Bury hens, roll hens, so on and so forth. There are major, and I mean major occult symbols being made in those crop formations, and we're not being allowed to see them. I've got them. I will prove it. It's in the DVDs. We have, and the reason those symbols are being used, who originally resided over those stone circles?
When you say resided over them, you mean
who had the authority over them? Who resided there? The Druids.
Oh.
The Druids, 8 times a year, were sacrificing human beings to false gods, a.k.a. the demons, a.k.a. Satan. Millions upon millions upon millions of gallons of blood is spilt on the ground through that entire region. It is the perfect consecrated ground to summon demons, to create these balls of light, to create these crop circles through which demonic forces are being used. The Druids were first summoning the demons. They are being summoned again to create these events. And who put up those ancient stone circles? The children of the demons, the giants. This is one act of the demons. This is, as I remind you, a spiritual battle being fought upon a physical plane. That's why you see in these physical events, the birth of giants, physical events, the creation of stone circles, physical events, the worship of these demons through sacrifice, physical event, the creation of these crop formation, physical event, the balls of light, physical event, all the other crop circles just concentrated in that one spot on the earth. This is the physical event of a spiritual beginning, the spiritual battle that is still going on. We are seeing, in a limited way, in a physical universe, the physical manifestation of that spiritual battle.
Okay, that makes sense.
All this was purposely and is still being done to hide the one event that terrifies them. Another physical event, the rapture.
Doc, alternatively, and let me just say this, alternatively, could this now this presupposes, I believe. Well, you know what? I'm not even gonna get. We don't even have to get into that. We don't even have to get into the timing of the rapture, regardless of when that is. What you're saying is this would cover it up. It doesn't really matter when you believe that the rapture might take place, but you're saying that this is the purpose would be to.
It's the one thing people will accept. Why do you think? Of
course.
Since the the golden age of UFOs, 1950s to the 60s, ever since that time, there's always been some sort of continuance of that thought line through television and movies. We've had the first television show on Martians was my favorite Martian. We've had Star Trek. We've had all these other shows. We had the TV series. We had the movie. There has been more television shows on UFOs than even I can remember. How many movies right now are dealing with alien species? Think of all the movies now that are still being produced in the name of outer space, alien beings, advanced technology, and a lot of times they're invading Earth. It hasn't stopped. They are conditioning people in a non-stop fashion to accept the concept of UFOs, aliens, life in outer space, advanced civilization. This way, people have been so inundated, they're ready to go for it. There was a survey that was done not too long ago, 6 months ago, in which it was American citizens that was asked, do you believe in life in outer space, aliens and all this other stuff? I believe the end result was 82 to 85% believes in UFOs and aliens and life in outer space.
Wow. Pretty significant number.
The conditioning process hasn't stopped.
So you're saying then, just to be clear, that all of this so-called UFO activity, these UFO spacecraft and what have you, are actually man-made creations, essentially. I mean, there's nothing extraterrestrial about them.
No, there isn't. And the reason, as I said, the reason is they've got to cover up the rapture. I mean, think about this. There's going to be one person who has an overnight meteoric rise who seemingly has all the answers to all the problems. He's identified as the Antichrist.
Right.
How many people are going to be more willing to accept this overnight meteoric rise if these little gray aliens point in his direction and says, that's the person you need to follow?
No.
And
okay. Well, why would they do that?
Isn't the false prophet also going to claim all his miraculous abilities and everything else, and he's going to take all the worship and put it on the Antichrist?
Well, of course. Yes. Okay. All right.
I mean, it won't get any better as far as giving a seal of approval. All this will aid in his rise to the ultimate power, and that's being the supreme one-world dictator who will set up a one-world religious order under a one-world New World government.
And there you have it, folks. There is what we've been working towards, what Doc has been working towards this entire show. The creation and more importantly, the acceptance of the one world government, one world order. Okay.
Yes, you have to accept them because remember, even if a person's not saved, let's think of how many people right now in America who's not saved. And yet, how many of those same unsaved people want to, impeach Barack Obama? See, you don't have to be saved to want to accept or reject someone. It just depends on how pretty the outer package is. So they're going to make this guy look like the coming Messiah. And if you remember, coincidentally, it just came to my mind, if you remember, the Illuminati cards say exactly this, don't they?
Yes.
And mind you, all those cards that speak of this are also in those two DVDs, DVD 9 and 10. As I said, it is a little bit more than 7 hours long. It's 3 DVDs total. It's in DVDs 9 and 10, 14 major sections, more than 750 diagrams, charts, original schematics, everything you could possibly want to prove even the hardest of believers. And it took me 3 months to put it all together, but this is the end game. This is the plan they've been working on for 75 years so that they could finally cover up the one event that they were afraid of, and that's known as the rapture.
Huh. Okay. Wow.
And we haven't even scratched the surface. As I said, you have to go through all the information yourself because there's a lot more to it than just what we've managed to discuss so far.
And Doc, let me ask you a question. Does not Satan try to duplicate everything that the Lord does?
No. See, Satan cannot duplicate anything of God. He can imitate, but he can't duplicate.
Imitate, like we talked about with Semiramis and Nimrod, and duplicating the Immaculate Conception and so on and so on.
No, they started that myth. If you want to talk about imitate, let's go with the magicians of Pharaoh. Remember how I told you they weren't duplicating God, God was duplicating them?
Right. Now, my question is, would they not?
They can try to imitate, but that's the best they can do.
Would they not try to imitate a rapture of sorts?
No. They would never dare do that. That's a Christian concept. You see, remember, they don't want people to know the giants are real. They don't want things like the Ark of Noah to ever be found because then it would prove God and that God was right. They would never do a false rapture. Simply because, again, that reeks of Christianity and they don't want God in the picture. Why do you think, if you remember, we've spoken on other programs, how they kicked God out of the public high schools, how they're trying to kick him out of the federal courts and other things? No.
Right.
They cannot do a false rapture. No.
Okay. All right. And folks, that delay that you hear, that silence that you hear, is the wheels turning, at least in my head, and as I process this information from Doc Marquis, as he postulates, what he his research and studied his entire life. So, wow. Okay. But we have
this part of the plan. This part of the plan I learned when I was in. That's how I learned all this stuff. I remember when those plans were going. I remember when I was under that hospital and I saw one of the earliest labs in which they were resequencing the double helix code. I saw all the old stuff from the days of Nazi Germany and what was going on.
Doc, I got to ask this question as an investigator. How would that be kept secret? I mean, maybe I'm naive for asking that question, but something that abhorrent, that startling, that beyond description, and those involved in this, how is that kept so secret?
You open your mouth, you're dead.
Fair enough.
Let's look at what's going on right now with our own government. Benghazi. No one knows anything, do they? You ask Hillary. I don't know what happened. Barack Obama, who's supposed to know everything going on. I don't know anything. Look at Susan Rice and the IRS. I don't know what happened. Look at that other one who just they threw under the bus. Supposedly she retired. You know, the IRS gal. I always forget her name.
Yeah.
Lois Lerner. I don't know anything.
Yeah.
Look at Eric. What's his name? Holtz or whatever his last name. I don't know anything about Fast and Furious.
Yeah. Okay.
It's only because the people have finally got so sick and tired that they finally had enough gumption to look under the rock and see what was there. It's the same thing with what you and I, Doug and Joe, and others have been doing for decades. We've been trying to get the people woken up to the truth to such a way that they're going to finally start looking and demanding answers. And when enough people have finally had it, we just might be able to turn things around. But they've got to know the truth first. Because you don't know what you're looking for, you will never find it.
That's a true statement. You'll be stumbling all over it, not realizing it. Now, when you say that we can turn things around, are you saying that we could? We're not going to change prophecy. We're not.
No,
that's not what you mean.
Not going to change prophecy, but we can change the numbers from unsaved to saved people.
That's okay. That's beautiful. Yep. And that's we look at this as part of our job, and we do that by providing people like you with the knowledge, the information, so people can understand the bigger picture as to what's going on. And really, it's a numbers game. Yes, I understand this. Okay, this is good. Good. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Doc, I've got about 5 or 6 people here that are asking me this question. Do you know? Do you believe you know what city, what area, what family the Antichrist himself will come from? And I know that you talk about this on your DVD, but if you can just kind of give us a little bit of a taste of that.
The Bible, if we piece it all together, tells us it's going to be a man from a Jewish background. It will be a male. He will be a virgin, and not because he's gay. But, you see, people don't understand what it's saying in Daniel chapters 11 and 12 in this regard. It talks about a man who will refuse the affection of a woman. The reason is, Jewish tradition to this very day tells us that some Jewish lady is going to have the Messiah. And this guy, being from a Jewish background, is not going to risk having the son of his own destruction. That's why that is in there. He is also going to be, it tells us he is also going to disregard the God of his fathers. Obviously, that's in direct reference to God Almighty. It also tells us that he's going to hate everything about God. He's going to hate everything about Christians. And eventually, as we find out in the Book of Revelation, he's going to hunt down any person who's saved. Beyond that, the Bible doesn't say another thing.
Interesting. All right. And the line of demarcation, perhaps, and pardon me if that's the wrong terminology, but would be the mark of the beast, the having the mark for allegiance to the beast enforced by
well,
the
it's
Antichrist.
more than a mark. Wait. Revelation 13, chapter 16 and 18 tells us there's going to be a mark, a name, and a number. You take either one of them, it's a death sentence to hell.
Okay, but you can't. Okay, but you have to take that with the knowledge that you are actually switching your allegiance from the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to.
Well, these people. Let's put it to you this way: if I was to walk down the road right now and say the God of Abraham and of Isaac and Jacob, I'd be willing to bet that 9 out of 10 people would look at me and say, "What are you talking about?" Because you're throwing in the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. How many people, especially Christians, aren't reading their Bibles?
Okay.
You only know this stuff if you read it or if it's being preached, and I guarantee you it's not being preached anymore.
Okay, well, then let me rephrase that. Is like in a courtroom setting here. It's my understanding then that you would have to willingly place your allegiance toward the Antichrist system.
Well, yes, because remember, this is the Messiah. Even Barbara Walters, let me throw something at you.
Okay.
When Barbara Walters and her colleagues saw Barack Obama and running for candidacy and all this other stuff, even she said, we thought he was the second Messiah.
Okay.
That's a direct quote. Now, with all her media savvy, you would think Barbara Walters would not have fallen for a glitzy glamour show. She should have dug into the hardcore truth, the background of this guy, but she was so enamored by him, her and her colleagues thought this was the coming Messiah. Now, how much greater is that deception going to be when it's the actual Antichrist?
There's no argument from me there. That's for sure. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, Barbara Walters, of all people, and her colleagues, we thought this was the coming Messiah.
So, and once again, folks, through the information provided by Doc Marquis, through his DVD series, and I do urge people to get his DVDs. They're full of information. Although I've got the, I think 1 and 2 and 3. But I guess what I'm saying is, you've got to understand, we need the knowledge. A lot of people will say, well, what in the heck are you talking about this for? Well, the reason we're talking about this is because this is really the ultimate, the core, the genesis of the deception. And of course, we're talking about eternal salvation or eternal damnation. So what more important thing could we be talking about? Am I right with that, or is that right?
Sounds good. Sounds good to me.
All right. Cool. Wow. We covered a lot of ground tonight, Doc. We're close to. We got about 7 minutes left.
We had to cover a lot of different areas, and I did it purposely, as I said, so that we could tie it up at the end to where it finally makes sense. There's so many things that envelop what is going on now, especially with the UFOs and everything else, but we had to go through a lot of history, a lot of different places, a lot of different events that was going on, so it could finally reveal the big picture.
Yeah, fantastic. Wow, Doc. Okay.
There is a method to my insanity.
Look, in the remaining 5 minutes or so we have of the program, is there anything that we didn't cover that you feel that we should cover, or perhaps reiterate?
Not that we could cover in 5 minutes. I was just hoping Paul Patson was going to call in, but either he couldn't make it or who knows. But I guess I'll just have to wait to see what this incredible, insightful question or whatever was going to be, was going to be.
Well, I know Joe was manning the switchboard and screening to find Paul. Didn't come across him, so I've got to say that if our phone banks are full, so in the event, because many people do listen via the phone, so in the event Paul couldn't get through or we missed him via the screening process, we apologize. But my goodness, this has been an educational program. It's unbelievable. So okay, how long do we have? How long do we have, in your estimation, before the Great Deception and all of this occurs?
Well, if I was to go purely by the Illuminati timelines now, if you remember, I have spoken of this probably just briefly in the past. You know, the Illuminati have a number of timelines, very well written out, detailed, and very specific. Now, going by what I recall, if we make it beyond 2028, I'm going to be surprised.
Wow.
Yeah.
The magic to 2028. I mean, why not 2027 or 20?
Now, let me add a codicil here. Now, as I said, ladies and gentlemen, I don't date set. I'm not a date setter. I don't believe in date setting. Okay? What I am doing is telling you, best of my memory, what I recall from all those timelines. One of the timelines, and if you remember, Doug and Joe, I said this more than a year ago, that between 2014 and 2018, that they were going to cause a major economic collapse in one nation. But at the time when I saw it back in 1970, that nation wasn't chosen yet. But they were going to cause an economic disaster so great that it would force other nations of the world to finally come together, sit down, and seriously discuss creating a one-world currency so it wouldn't happen to any of them. And everything right now, as far as I can tell, is exactly the way it's supposed to be according to the timeline, because I'm classing monies. Let's look at Greece, Turkey, Spain, Portugal. France is on the way. England is going to be on the way unless something's done. You know, the timelines are what they are. They're plans. And what's interesting, if you, again, remember, Doug and Joe, the Illuminati playing cards, how many of their plans have come true exactly as the cards have stated? 9/11. 9/11 was in the cards. The Fukushima Daiichi power plant disaster is in the cards. The BP oil spills is in the cards. The death of Princess Diana of Wales were in the cards. I mean, the Illuminati, when they put something in stone, it's going to happen. That's all I can say, folks. I mean, I'm trying to explain to you the best I can from my personal experience that when they put something in stone, I've never seen it not happen. Unless there's some type of divine intervention that's going to happen soon, I would say, to the best guess, between 2028 to 2038 at the most, and then they've got it all in their back pockets. And then they can set up their New World Order whenever they choose. At that point, it's at their sufferance, whenever they choose.
But in the meantime, it's going to be rocky.
Let's face it, everything right now, and again, ladies and gentlemen, and this is not for the sake of selling DVDs. This next DVD, DVD 13, unlike Joe who believes it's DVD 11. What did you think? I was going to forget that one? Joe, give me a break. This next DVD, which I'm going to be leaving shortly to go shoot, which is going to be called Dictators of the Illuminati, you will see why Barack Obama is doing exactly the plans of the Illuminati. I am talking to the letter. You, as I said, by comparison, I'm going to have to take you back into history again, like we went tonight. I'm going to take you to the plans of the Illuminati. I'm going to take you to their dictators, their puppets, and I'm going to show you their plans, their written plans that was first written out back in the mid-1700s now, are still on course. They wrote them. They're happening right now, and you will see that what Barack Obama is doing is exactly what the plans would call for. He is literally dismantling and destroying everything you and I hold sacred as Americana, and yet he acts with impunity. He thinks, I've got a phone, I've got a pen, I'm going to bypass Congress. I don't have to obey the laws because I'm obeying the Illuminati. This is what's going on. And again, in this new DVD, just like in DVD 9 and 10, I will show you the proof. I will show you the evidence.
Can't wait, Doc. Once again, it's been a fabulous show and so much information. Can't wait to re-listen to this again. God bless you for all that you do, and we'll be calling you here shortly as soon as we close down.
Absolutely, folks. Go to Doc's website, accessible via HomelandSecurityUS.com. His website is God Things Production.
It's the God Things Production 777.
Thank you. .com. That's right. And grab a hold of the DVDs. Well worth the time and money. I'll tell you what, Doc, you do a great job. Thank you so very much. God bless you. Until a few minutes, just take care of yourself.
Tomorrow night.
Always my pleasure, kind sir.
All right, buddy.
Thanks
man.
Tomorrow night, Paul McGuire. Until then, stay safe. God bless. Have a great night.